Well, welcome back to the Yahowah vlog. I'm your host, Craig Winn, and this handsome fellow, he, of course, is Wookie. We're in the library studio, which means we're going to return to our present theme, which is another episode of the final word picture. It is the story of the 31st and concluding Mashal, or proverb. It is easily the most difficult story I have ever told. I've been with Yah in pursuit of the truth, finding it, sharing it, translating it, interpreting it, coming to understand it now for 24 and a half years. And this, quite simply, is the most amazing find thus far. I may have made a slight mistake, however, and that I left the remainder of the tea bottle by my feet, and Cara found it. So it has become a joyous toy for them to scrape along the floor. All right. So the reason I say that this is the most difficult job I've ever done is twofold. One of the reason for this intervention back 3,000 years ago is because our king, the man we love and adore more than any other, acted very badly. This morning, I have been in the midst of translating and presenting, commenting on Dowd's behavior when he was 56 years old, 14 years from the end of his first of three lives. It's the story of Bathsheba, and we will get to it because it is part of this story and a future episode. But it's breathtaking in its implications. And so reporting this kind of information about our king is hard. I shared my translation of 2 Samuel 11 with Rich not more than 15 minutes ago. And I think it's the first time I've heard Rich release an F-bomb.
It's a WTF moment.
It is. It's tough. And Yahowah did everything but give up. His reaction is presented in the 12th chapter of 2 Samuel. And it's heartbreaking. So this intervention is what ultimately saved the world. Now, you might say, okay, well, that's the good part. But yes, it is. And this intervention, it's clearly performed by a woman whom Yahowah and Dowd announce elsewhere is the Amah, the productive mother. Here she is called the Ashar and the greatest of women. So this is extraordinary. She is the wife of Yada. Now, you might say, okay, well, isn't that glorious? You were able to go back in time. Leah was, and it's clearly a 1-2 punch. When you read many of the other Mashal, they talk about this incident, and it's a husband and wife. It's the two of us dealing with our adopted son. He needed counseling. He needed an intervention. And you might say, well, isn't that glorious? You had this opportunity to do that. Yes and no. That was another life, long time ago. This is a very different life. You see, what I have determined is that since God cannot take someone back in time to interact back in time without destroying the universe, it would literally rip apart the universe if he were to do so. It would change cause and effect. It's written really into the fabric of light and how light is the governing aspect of the universe. You can't go back in time. So knowing that, the only way that Yahowah could keep his plan on track when it was on the verge of falling apart was to have someones in particular, that were souls that he could insert when he needed them and bring them back out. And one of the things I shared is that this is manifest in the hinted form by Enoch. Enoch is actually, Chanak is the proper name, and it means that somebody who was prepared, devoted, and deployed. That's what his name means. And God used him and then withdrew him. And he is the standard for this practice. When God needs someone to intervene in such a way that resolves an issue that would otherwise preclude the normal implementation of his plan, he sends them in and he withdraws them. And if he does so in the ordinary flow of time, there is no issue. And the souls that he uses to do this only need to know enough at that particular time to do that particular job. And there is no reason that they would need to have a reservoir of memory of what they did in the previous time. Although I'm sure that there have been overlapping instances where she or I had this memory. But each of us, all of us, gets to live one life. Even if you're one of those unique individuals that God inserts throughout time, you get to live one life that's completely subject to free will. You know, Leah's struggling this morning when I met with her and on this subject and saying, did I have free will? How was I used in this way? Why don't I have a memory of it? And I said, because you haven't processed how God deploys nephesh souls. All he is obliged to do is to make certain that in one insertion, one time that our souls are active, that we are conceived the old-fashioned way in that life. And in that life that we enter it with a clean slate as a nephesh and a nesama, and we have the opportunity to demonstrate that we will come to know Yah, come to love him, come to appreciate who he is, become Torah observant, do the very things that Yahowah ultimately needs us to do to be useful, to be observant, to be responsive, and to be reliable. And for us, that is this life. In the others, we had other responsibilities and sent in for other purposes. But it's not like Yahowah is trying to have a huge cast of characters so that the players are difficult to follow. And so he is quite committed to having a certain group of people serve in a particular capacity. And with our beloved king, Dowd, who is returning, brilliant as the sun in our presence. Well, his throne is anyway, the Kaporah, the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. And he's represented by the sun, Dowd is, he's the greater luminary. He needed mothering. He needed fathering. He needed parenting. He needed someone to give him counsel. And it appears that that's going to be a role that we get to play going forward. So this is an ongoing story, and it's I don't expect that all of you, or even many of you, or even most of you are going to appreciate the complexity of this, of the idea that God would have a mother and father figure in support, particularly of his beloved son, when his son came off the rails, and how that was possible some 3,000 years ago. And the same souls, the same nephesh that perform that role can talk to you this day from this stage. But it is as I'm sharing it, and You don't have to know that. You don't have to agree with it to capitalize on what God is offering vis-a-vis the covenant. It's incremental. It explains a lot. It puts all the pieces of the picture in together. It brings it all into focus. It's a marvelous way for God to tell his story his way, that he did it all the way that he had promised when he spoke to Moshe after the children of Israel had said, we don't want to see you or hear from you again, that he would do it all through people. And he did. So God did it his way. God was able to demonstrate, and is demonstrating, I should say, that it was indeed possible for someone to figure it out, even if it was, in both cases, more than halfway through their mortal existence, their first life born the old-fashioned way, that they would figure it out somewhere along the way. They would become observant. They'd become responsive and engaged, giving you their all, God their all, and ultimately become reliable, seeing it through. There was a lovely song that was posted by the son of the gentleman, Will O'Brien, that his son's name is Jake. That was on Family Hour last Friday evening during the Shabbat show. And I started by kidding with Will, saying, you're one of the few people who's we know by a last name where you're the second fiddle in your family. And, he looked and kind of, why am I being disparaged here by my name? And I said, it's because your son, Jake, is one of the very favorites in the covenant family. And, then he smiled. Of course, he's a proud father of his son. Well, Jake posted a song, and it was it has a cartoonish illustration of the picture that Leah took of me before. There's a beautiful rainbow behind me standing on our deck. And he wrote a song about the life of Yahowah's Nakar and what it's going to be like to serve as the Adamah Parah. And in it, he twice, or maybe even more times, mentioned the word perfect before the Adamah Parah. And it struck a chord with me because one of the more intelligent rebuttals to our constant presentation of Jesus never existed, and Dowd is the Messiah and Son of God who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, becoming our Savior, was that a Christian said that's not possible because he wasn't perfect. He had a man killed so he could steal his wife. And that's a tough situation to respond to. I mean, of course, Jesus wasn't perfect because he never existed, and he was in contradiction to the Towrah, which made him even far worse. And there is no indication that, of course, even the myth is not even associated with Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, so that the myth accomplished nothing. It's all a counterfeit and lie, so that certainly isn't perfect. So it's not like Christianity has the perfect, but, isn't it supposed to be the perfect lamb that fulfills Passover? And Dowd did this horrible thing. So I decided that when I saw the word perfect in his song, heard it 3 times, that I would actually study the etymology of that word. Tamam is the Hebrew word that is typically translated perfect. And even it means just to continue to be steadfast in doing something, to be consistent, to show integrity in this regard. And of course, we can live up with that. But all of those are derivative from its actionable root, which is tamam. And the actionable root, tamam, means to finish the job, to be wholly devoted to completing what needs to be done, to fulfill the prophecy, and to do so wholeheartedly to the very end. So God's definition of perfect, therefore, is what we're doing. We've been doing it now for nearly 25 years, and we're going to see it through to the end. And although Dowd had a timeout for bad behavior, the fact is that he started at 8 and he made it all the way through 56 before he went off the rails. So, that's 48 years. I haven't invested 48 years in this yet. I've just shared. I've been at it for 24 and a half. He had me beat by twice, right? By the time that he went off the rails, he was consistent up to that point. And then ultimately, he did the same thing that Moshe did. Moshe, after a year the first year really of leading the children of Israel during the Exodus, came to God and said, "This job's impossible. I don't want to do it anymore. And if you have any respect for me, you'll just kill me now, because I don't want to continue." But he did. He made a deal with God. They got the children of Israel to the promised land, and God showed Moshe that he had a couple of guys that he was going to bring into the story to finish the job. But getting people to stick with it and to finish the job and to be, therefore, Yahweh's definition of perfect, which is just to be reliable. All right. Pay attention, be responsive, and be responsible. It's not a lot, but God's had a tough time finding people that would do that. And it is what made Dowd ultimately perfect for the role, is because he not only lived the first, from 8 to 56, 48 years of his life was devoted to doing what needed to be done. That's 8 more than Moshe, and it's twice as much as mine up to this point. He, after the counseling that we're reading about here from his adoptive mother and subsequently from his adoptive father, he manned up, and in his second of 3 lives, he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Makodim, allowing the Romans to crucify his body, being the lone eyewitness to the event and telling us all about it in the 22nd Mizmor. And then having the courage, the compassion, the character to be the only man to carry his own and others' guilt into Sheol and to spend matzah there, carrying our guilt away, so that we could earn the right to be seen as perfect in God's eyes, not because we were blameless, but because with our guilt gone, we're in a position where we can finish the job. And that is the story that God is telling, and this is the story that was necessary to hear. Now, as we've gone through this presentation, I have shared that my marriage to Leah was an arranged one. Yahweh sent her to me 18 years ago. And as I told my wife around lunch today, when she was still struggling with all of this, because she's an introvert, and this has come at her like a flood, and I at least had the first 10 years of being more or less anonymous before the last 14 to 15 have been lived in the spotlight. And so I had this time to build up to this. Now, she's had it too. I mean, we've been together 18 years and constant Towrah study and growth before she's learned that she's a key player in God's story. But as a woman who is more of an introvert, it's harder on her than it probably was on me. Although as I've kidded with everybody, I'm going to revert back to being an introvert, which is what I was growing up. Once this is all over, and I might hibernate for a little while.
Yeah, you're
so
probably going to need a vacation after all of this.
Yeah, so we might go from being a bull to a bear, and hibernate for a while. I'm sure that God will give us the strength to go on, and then we need to finish the job, and we will. And so, but it's important for you to know that when searching for who God was, Yahowah, who she didn't know God's name at the time, and trying to find what he wanted out of her life, God responded to her. God doesn't have to respond to everyone, but she had grown away from religion. She was not political, not religious at the time. She was genuinely seeking, and she reached out to God, and God directed her in the following way. He said, "Go ask Ruth." So she did. And when she did, she read. Then this would be her future husband, someone that she was just meeting now for the first time. His name is Boaz. It means with strength, with resolve, with determination. Then he asked with ongoing implications, "Who are you?" It's the same question that Leah would ask of me. It's the same question she would ask later of her adopted son, Dowd. She answered, "I am Ruth, longing and striving to shepherd the flock." I am Ruth, longing to shepherd and striving to care for the flock, tending to and feeding the sheep as your Amah, your productive mother. Now, of course, Ruth was not Boaz's mother, but she would be a model for being the mother of all Yisrael. She was pronouncing the arrival of the Amah. The Amah permeate the Mizmor, where Dowd says that he is exceedingly grateful to Yahowah for Yahowah sending his Amah to him, his productive mother, to Dowd, who released Dowd from the bondage of the considerable guilt that was holding him down for having done such a horrible thing in his life. And so Ruth here is now announcing, "I am your Amah." Just as Leah has become the Amah to her Boaz. She is the productive mother of the covenant. It's a point, by the way, that Yeshayah Isaiah makes perfectly clear in the 54th chapter, where he speaks about the barren woman who will conceive so many children as part of the covenant that everything has to be enlarged just to make room for God's expanding family. So he says, "I am Ruth, longing and striving to shepherd the flock as your productive mother. So spread out the hem of your garment as your wings over your Amah, your maternal co-worker, who is branded and marked to deliver the Gaal, the kinsman redeemer, to save you." And she would. That is the story we are articulating now in the final word picture. The Amah as the Ashar, which was the very thing that Leah prescribed of herself, saying that she would be the beneficial and blessed one. And that's how she would be remembered and known as a result of being a adoptive mother of Asher, one of the sons of Israel. So Ruth, longing to serve as a shepherd, as has Leah, to serve as the productive mother. From her instructions regarding her future husband's apparel to delivering the kinsman redeemer to him, this was so specific to our situation and to this situation. It's obvious that God had this planned all along. 31 centuries ago, many generations before Dowd was even born. Going to have to get up pretty early in the day if you're going to beat Yahowah to a prophecy. Now, even more amazing, the man that she was addressing as her future husband, as I've shared, his name was Bo'az. The proper pronunciation is probably Bo'az or Bo'oz. It means in strength, with power, fortified. He was the man that had the endurance to prevail. His name would serve to identify the north or left pillar of the temple, because he would serve as a template, a harbinger of the left hand of God. The south column, the one on the right hand of God, the one closest to the city of Dowd, because the temple, as you know, faces east. So on the right hand would be the south side, which is below that would be Dowd's home and the city of Dowd down the ridge line of Moriah. So on the right side, towards the city of Dowd, it was named Yakyn, one with the ability to overcome, to succeed and endure. Dowd would have to overcome malfeasance of his own making. When I share with you what he did and said, it's going to make your skin crawl to understand what he had to overcome to return to that position as the right hand of God and as the Yakyn. Now, these two amudim, columns, which means stand together, means that they were forever juxtaposed as supporting pillars. They would create an alam, a permanent bond, on the porch of the Hekel, the temple and royal residence for the covenant family. I want to read this to you because it means that the Go Ask Ruwth was quite the setup by God. It not only directed Leah to her role as Amah, the protective mother, to her role as a shepherdess, which is also part of what Leah, the name, conveys, but also to her future husband, Bo'az, one strengthened to prevail, who would be forever linked to Dowd, to Yahowah's temple, to one of the two columns, the one on the left side. It was all there. Every bit of it. Go ask Ruth. So to prove that point, I want to share with you what we know about those two columns. It reads, he established, erecting by standing upright, that which pertains to the amudim, the support pillars. Amudim means the unifying juxtaposition of that which is side by side, standing and grounded, remaining and enduring, such that they take a unified stand and remain together. For the alam, the portico, to make a permanent bond on the porch of the Hekel, the temple, the royal residence and grand palace, the temple. So you can say, oh, they're just columns of stone. What's the big deal? Well, they were erected to stand upright. They pertain to amudim, support pillars that convey the unifying juxtaposition of that which will always remain side by side, standing up and grounded, remaining and enduring, unified in their stance together. and they are along on the portico to make a permanent bond on the porch of the Hekel, the royal residence and grand palace. Well, that should have been enough, but there's more. When he established and stood upright, that which pertains to the Amud, unifying juxtaposition of the support pillar, on the right-hand side or south, he was called and proclaimed, read aloud, and summoned for the Mikra by that which is associated with his name, reputation, and renown, as Yakyn, the one with the ability to overcome, succeed, and endure. His hand establishes and is victorious. And he established, standing upright, that which pertains to the Amud, the support pillar, by his side to endure, standing together on the left-hand side or north. So he was called and proclaimed, read aloud, and summoned for the Mikra as well, by that which was associated with his name and reputation, his renown. Bo'az, powerful one, with prevailing strength. That's from Malachim, 1 Kings 7:21. Well, the king's renown as Yakyn, the hand who establishes us. It is through this intervention that we've been studying that he was able to, Yakyn, overcome his prior mistakes. This is how he came to succeed in the fulfillment of the Mikra. And it's the way that he is now given this opportunity to return as our Melech. And Kum, standing Amud beside him, just 12 cubits apart. 12 tribes, right? Forever juxtaposed. Even Shamali, clothed for the occasion, 18 cubits high, with the cubit also being Amah, was Bo'az, the powerful and prevailing bull of Towrah, his herald, his adoptive mother's husband, and his adoptive father. And so addressing the 12 tribes of Israel, he is reporting this 18 years after being introduced to the Amah, after he searched for the meaning of Asher. But I'm sure that it's all just a colossal cosmic coincidence. Or maybe not. Now, just as mothers dress their children while trying to properly clothe their husbands, Leah will always be known for adorning the covenant family, beginning with her Baal and Ben. Should you not be attired in one of Leah's designs, you will likely be omitted from the Chag party. I say that based on what follows. Commonly, invitations include a reference to acceptable attire, do they not? When you're invited to a party, don't you read that the attire is casual or it's formal or something in between, business casual sometimes? There's always a dress code. But there isn't on one of Yahowah's invitations. Do you know why? The Amah is providing it. The attendees on Towrah, on the wedding and family reunion during Kippurim, and then as we enter the garden on Sukkah, will be properly festooned for the occasion. Gratis, the Amah. And may I remind you, Leah's career, as she was a young woman growing up in South Florida, was as a fashion designer. Linen garments which envelop, she has made, and she values offering as a quid pro quo. She will give and offer in exchange, surrendering and transferring possession of something highly treasured. And celebratory sashes for the feasts she offers as a gift to the Canaanite, the merchant salesman, the one engaged in trade, buying and selling. Canaanite, it's if we're reading this in the Towrah, we would have translated it Canaan and explained it that it means merchant salesman. But the Canaanites were long gone by this point. We're now dealing with this is being revealed circa 3,000 years ago, long after the Canaanites were gone. And so the gift is to her merchant salesman. More on that in a moment. So it reads here that the linen garments which envelop she has made, and she values offering them as a quid pro quo. She transfers something highly treasured as celebratory sashes for the feast. This is chagor. It would mean all things pertaining to the chag. The chag are like the mikre. It's chag matzah and chag sukkah. And she offers them as a gift to her Canaanite, her merchant salesman, the one who is engaged in trade, buying and selling. That's Mashal, word picture, 31:24. Well, just as she is a fashion designer by trade, I am Canaanite. I am a merchant salesman. I have spent over a score of years doing so. And if you want to read about it, you want some evidence that this is true, read In the Company if you're curious as to why I earned this distinction. In the Company is now presented at the bottom of the Yahowah page. If you click on books, they have a number of links at the top, and they have grown. If you click on books, the last bottom row of books, after you see an introduction to God, and then you see the 3 books there, and then the 9 that are part of the Yahowah series, and the 5 that are part of the Observation series, and then you see the 3 that are part of Coming Home, followed by the 3 that are part of the Babel series, and the 5 that are part of Twistianity, and another 5 that are part of Goddamn Religion, excoriating Islam. Down there all by its lonesome. You'll find In the Company. I'm a merchant salesman. I spent over a score of years doing that very thing. And Leah will be establishing the makar, this quid pro quo, as remuneration for her garments. I suspect that she will ask nothing more than what Dowd and Yada are offering. Respect and appreciation. That'll be difficult for some, a price too hard for them to pay. With all of the splendor and majesty associated with Kippurim, the day of reconciliations, when Yahweh returns with Dowd, the mother of the groom, will be the most beautiful woman in attendance, even if she is 4,000 to 6,000 year old by the time. It's kind of a strange thing that we are old souls, but we'll have refurbished bodies. Strength and dignity. Oz. Oh, what was the name of that fellow that was going to be the Amah's husband?
Obed-Edom?
No. Yeah, well, he is Obed-Edom in this life. That is for true. Oh, Mouse.
House.
Yeah, strength. It's Oz here. It can be pronounced Oz or Oz. It's where we get where they got the name Wizard of Oz. Yeah, the great mighty Oz. Well, that's what Oz means, great and mighty. So this anyway is strength. It's interesting to come off the story of Boaz when it means with Oz. Strength and dignity, a most beautiful appearance. and noble status and character, Hadar, adorn her. And she is amused and entertained. She is smiling and laughing during the day to come, at long last, and throughout the future. Mashal word picture, Proverbs 31:25. I tried to remind Leah of that today as she's stressing out when I came in to get her for this broadcast. She was flat out napping. She spent all night up reading everything she could find on this role of being a mother to the covenant family and a surrogate mother to Dowd. And so she was, as this prophecy has already foretold, burning the midnight oil and was up all night doing this. And so she collapsed not long ago. And it's a lot of stress. There are those who I'm sure will say, how egotistical of you to claim this. And it's exactly the opposite. It is so much easier being an unnamed player that gets to contribute, gets to earn Yah's favor and respect, because everything that you do is on the plus side of the ledger. There aren't established expectations and responsibilities, just unlimited opportunities. And that's really the best possible position to be in. But she's no longer in that position, and it's uncomfortable for her because she has watched me over the last 18 years that she's known me. And the more I become known as a contributor to God's overall story, the bigger the target grows and the more I'm attacked. I was just telling Rich, I said, it's a great job. So I go out and I do a vlog that says, I killed Jesus, and denounce the credibility of the most popular religion in the world. I've written the definitive books proving that Allah is Satan and that Muhammad was not a prophet. Now I've got 5.5 billion people at my throat that want to either denigrate me or kill me for having fun so far. Then I have to tell the MAGA that their president that they are all but worshiping as a Messiah is equivalent to the Antichrist, that he is demon possessed. That, of course, puts me in fine stead with Republicans. And then I have to tell Democrats that as an expert on economics and world history, I can tell them that Marxism and socialism is completely counterproductive. And that their current rage against Israel is going to put them in the crosshairs of God's displeasure. And then, of course, I get to remind everyone on social media that these platforms have become toxic, that artificial intelligence is dumbing the world down, that there's generations now that have no character, don't know what it's like to work and make a contribution, and that the most popular influencers are a bad influence. So how am I doing so far? Is that maybe why I have 30,000 posts on X and slightly over 2,000 followers? I would say that's probably a direct correlation. Oh, and by the way, I'm also having to ridicule AI, including Grok, and the founder of X for having lost his way. And I'm not real pleased with the founder of Facebook right now because he's kowtowing to a new version of cop-out thought police. So it puts you in a very unpopular position to speak for Yahowah. And it's never been any different. So she is now dealing with this. And of course, it's reeling from it because it's a tough call. And God's not going to accept anything less than the last full ounce of our devotion. That is what is expected of us. So Leah will be accompanied by Boaz, with strength, and that that man, he is her Baal, her husband. But even independently, she is becoming a strong woman in her own right. And this is part of building her up. I had to remind her again today when she's so concerned about the added responsibility. I said to her that you were brought to me. I am your Baal. I am responsible for you. And therefore, it's my job to fortify you, to equip you, to teach you, to protect you, to enable you. So, yeah, eventually you're going to need to learn to relax and enjoy this job under those circumstances. So, although my Leah would prefer to lean on the strength of her man and will again, once she has processed some of this, knowing her, she would find a million excuses to skip the party without me holding her hand. If I were not there with her, you would see her as a seventh time runaway bride. Done it 6 times already. It is just who she is, and it's who we are. By way of confession, when I was first introduced to Lisa, now Leah, by Asher, our Snow White Labrador puppy of 8 weeks at the time, I already knew that we were a perfect match in values, priorities, proclivities, personality, and intellect. In appearance, however, she was different than anyone I had ever dated. So as a visual creature, when she showed up in boots up to her knees and in a trench coat down to below the top of her boots in South Florida, this overcoat, because it was too chilly for her in Florida, I wasn't smitten initially. It was while sitting on this park bench outside the airport in front of baggage claim that I thought to myself, well, this may be nothing more than the lunch that she had suggested. So it would take me a few hours to change my mind. I had sweet talked her into a relaxing and therapeutic jacuzzi that I had installed on the flybridge of my yacht, which was named Parah, which was docked alongside the inland waterway in the backyard of my South Florida home. She was so shy. She managed to slink in behind a towel unseen into that jacuzzi. But when she flew out of it moments later to rescue Asher, who had scrambled too far aft before the rails were installed all around that aft deck, seeing her for the first time dripping wet in her bathing suit, well, all I could think was to ask her who had made her so exquisitely beautiful. And of course, now she is the most beautiful woman in the world to me, with a truly noble status, glorious character, and completely amusing and often entertaining personality. As she says, I'm an acquired taste. Yes, but it's one that I've curated. Now, as one would expect when I look at places other than her eyes, she opens her mouth and says, I'm glad that you like what you see, but my brain is what matters most, and it's a little higher than you're presently looking, love. And then she smiles. This is what was written. She opens her mouth with wisdom, intelligently revealing the capacity to understand. Chakma. And a loyal love and affection, showing great favoritism and devotion for the Torah. Its guidance and teaching are on her tongue. Proverbs, word picture, 31:26. Leah has many interests, but one love, Torah. She may be among the most Torah observant women ever. When the Amah speaks words of Chokmah, wisdom, intelligence emerges. She has been gifted with uncommon mental acumen, and her forte is in Chokmah, showing the mental aptitude to understand Yahweh's Torah guidance and teaching. It is the chesed, love of her life. And to God's instructions and directions, she is absolutely devoted. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't add that Dowd begins his poetic presentation of the Towrah, which is probably the most important of the prophetic prophecies regarding the role that I've been asked to play. And he does so by saying that the Towrah's wife is Chokmah, exceptionally wise. And since this discussion has been sensual, in addition to cerebral, one of the first things I learned about Leah is that she is a sapiosexual. Now, most people don't even know what that means. Fortunately, I did when she first sprung it on me. And it means that when it comes to getting her motor running, intellect trumps appearance, and brains are more important than brawn. That is how she is being depicted here. Now, as those with whom we share our lives know, as after cruising in Parah to the Virgin Islands, Leah and I have built our love nest overlooking the sea, where the Amah is queen of her castle. She keeps watch, always on the lookout, in the ways, walk, and affairs of her family and home. She does not consume or feed upon the bread of conflict of those who lack discipline, are immoral, the idle or the lazy, the ashuth, the sluggish and inert, who are inactive and fail to take initiative and make a contribution. Boy, is that ever Leah. Leah's been devoted to her people in the covenant family for, well, now we know thousands of years, culminating in our home, which has become a studio for the Yahowah vlog. From her office, she produces all of our branding and composes marvelous songs to draw Yisrael back home to Yah. She doesn't now produce all of it, but she coordinates all of it. She has a group of men and women who contribute mightily to the enterprise at this point. Now, Leah has no interest in nor use for the undisciplined or the immoral, even the idle and lazy. In her view, either contribute or get out of the way. She would say, get off my porch. Either stand up for what is right or and be against those who are wrong, or, yes, indeed, get off her porch. And just as this states, and as Dowd no doubt observed, her focus is on the positive and uplifting rather than the bread of conflict. Her family matters, and that includes the covenant. In fact, that is her family, but expressly excludes rivals and naysayers, troublemakers and antagonists. Her walk is with Yah, and that takes her away from all of those who are in conflict with him. Now, this next statement was an even bigger shock than the positive references to Baal. Then, after considering what Leah said 4,000 years ago, the actual meaning of the word, the realization that it represents one of the 12 names comprising Yisrael, and the fact that the adversary seeks to corrupt what Yahweh cherishes, well, claiming this title began to make perfect sense. Yahweh is restoring more than just the planet for our return to Eden. He is also cleaning up our vocabulary too. You know, one of the reasons that I had such a tough time with Leah's husband, Yada, being Baal, is that I think of the great orator, Leah, criticizing the prophets of Baal. But he went off after the religious interpretation of it, not what the word means, which is husband. And if you recall that while there were 450 religious advocates for their false interpretation of Baal, there were also 400 for their false interpretation of Ashar. Were there not? And so by bringing these two names together, husband and wife, Baal and Ashar, God is claiming the very terms that Satan stole. It is another reason why Eliah's dress rehearsal as the man ridding Israel of its religiosity 2,880 years ago is so opportune for this moment, because he got rid of all the naysayers who were corrupting what Baal and Ashar would represent forevermore with God and his people. So this reads, with that introduction, her children will rise up and take a stand, and they will call her Ashar, a beneficial blessing for having revealed the way to the relationship. Her husband, Baal, the Lord and Master too. He reflects her bright and clear light and consistently praises her, extolling her virtues. Mashal word picture, Proverb 31:28. I share this with you honestly and say, when I first was introduced to this, because, I've read through everything in the Torah and prophets so many, many times, but it's a whole different experience when you are examining every word, when you're not looking at careless renderings, but very thoughtful deductions of what each word says. And it was less than a month ago when Leah brought this to my attention and said, you need to stop what you're doing and deal with this. It's Mashal 31. Now, she said it in a way that got my attention, as women sometimes can do and wives can do. And it was on a little piece of paper, and I retrieved it in the bright and early the next morning after a wonderful evening together. We read it in Hebrew. And when we came to this line, we just looked at each other. We had so embraced Eliah's refutation of the prophets, the religious pontificators for Baal and Asherah, and had been so anti-religious that we naturally came to the conclusion that, well, those must be bad titles. And yet there was this problem with that, because Baal is the only Hebrew word for husband. And it's a husband who acts as a lord and master of his home. In other words, he is there to protect, to support his wife. And Asher is my favorite Hebrew word. It means beneficial relationship, to show the way to the blessings of the relationship that Yahowah intended. It's to reveal the means to get the greatest joy out of life. It's the first word I translated, the first word that Dowd wrote in his first Mizmor. It's such a spectacular word. It was Asher that introduced Leah and I. I love that word. And here you have Leah saying that she will forever be known as Ashar, blessed and beneficial. And so we had to process the fact that everything that Satan covets. Jesus being the Son of God and the Messiah and the Savior, the chosen one. When every one of those accolades is afforded to David. Satan coveting the title Baal, coveting the title Ashar. It's what he does. He wants to be perceived by the things of God. He doesn't want to be the adversary. He wants to be known by the things of God. And so he counterfeits them. And it opened up our eyes that, our vocabulary needed a little cleansing too. And that we were being too black and white on things. And sometimes you need to see all the contours, all the shadings, all the beauty of a word when rendered properly and what it can be. Yahweh does not want to serve as the Lord and Master of his people. He wants to be Father. God's view of the ideal marriage, and he's not saying you have to ascribe to this. You're free to do however you want in any of your relationships. But his view of the ideal marriage has the man being protective, and has the man taking the lead role in creating the environment that they can thrive and raise their family, and that a ideal wife is supportive in that way, and she can express herself with total confidence, knowing that she is protected in that kind of a relationship. I'm not saying it's for everyone. It works for us. We're presented that way. She is beneficial. She's a blessing. I am very assertive. I have a commanding presence. It works for us. We're very happy in that, and this is how God has described us. So I recognize that from God's point of view, these are actually very positive terms. Asher, of course, is the word I've loved most of all right from the beginning. It's the first word that opened up our understanding to many thousands more over the years. Now, when it says her children, was childless up to this point. She's the barren woman. Of course, there were 6 women, and I will delineate them, who were barren in God's story, each of which case it was resolved, and it's quite a story. That's all indicative of this story when I share those stories with you. And here, the barren woman, we're told in Yeshaya 54, is going to have a huge family. And that her children, the covenant family, are going to rise up and they're going to take a stand. It's what we do. Matter of fact, is not the grain, the wheat that is collected on Shabuah, standing grain. So the covenant family is going to take a stand. They are that standing grain. And they're going to call her. And Ashar here is a verb. It is presented in the Peel imperfect third person masculine singular. It says that they're going to call her. They're going to actively proclaim her. They're going to pronounce that her name is Asher, a positive and encouraging influence, one who promotes an upright and properly guided life by leading them along the correct path. They will call her Asher, a beneficial blessing. And they're going to call her husband Baal, the Lord, the Master. The Lord and Master of the house. In this time, with the language of the day, it was considered an honorarium in a way. It would be back when I was young, we called adults sir, and we called, if they were male, and we called women ma'am. And it was strictly a sign of respect. Baal is husband, and it's a designation of respect, so that the children of the covenant are going to refer to Leah as Ashar and me as Baal. Sir, the Lord and Master of the one who has controlling influence over this covenant family. As a matter of fact, Yah was really quite clear that that in this role, in the children that become covenant, one of the first acts is that I get to give them to Dowd. Here, they're yours. I'll watch over you, you watch over them. In the case of Leah and I, will watch over you. These are our children, and we're giving them to you. And then it concludes in the 28th statement by, he reflects her bright and clear light and constantly praises her, reinforces her, extolling her virtues. You know, for those that might be, I am woman, hear me roar. How dare you say that you are Baal, Lord and Master, as husband? And then you're going to have to deal with this, because with that added responsibility goes a whole level of additional commitment to the relationship, responsibility to the relationship, really. And in this case, the thing that comes with that is a reflection of her brilliance. I'm putting her in a position where her virtues can be known, where they can be seen, where her light can be shown to the world, praising her, extolling her, bragging about her, appreciating her tremendous value, her exceptional worth, her brilliant radius. So excuse my distraction, Asher's having a conniption fit with her toe again, and so we have an issue with her. The mother, who was sent by Yahowah to redeem God's son, accomplished far more, because by doing so, she made our adoption into the covenant family possible. As Ruth foretold, she delivered the Gaal, the kinsman redeemer, to Boaz, the one with fortitude and strength. And he, as her Baal husband, would restore the Redeemer's reputation for Yisrael's benefit. This is how God's story plays out. So as we know, the Amah, the productive mother who became Ashar, the beneficial blessing, by promoting her Baal husband's message regarding her son to her people, is also, just as the prophets foretold, she is the barren woman who would become fruitful and productive again, raising many children. Leah and then Ruth claimed these titles on her behalf, prophetically revealing one of the most surprising revelations in God's entire story, even if it was hinted at in the second chapter of the first book in that series. Now, in keeping all of this in mind, just as yada is always portrayed as a verb, and thus as an action-oriented designation, in this case, Ashar is also a verb. This was an Amah, productive mother, because she actively engaged. With Leah returning to reprise his role in refuting those in opposition to Yahowah, with the uplifting burnt offering of the bull, we are reminded that he roasted the religious who had falsely claimed that Baal and Asherah were gods. It turns out these false prophets were also guilty of misappropriating key contributors to God's story. When Leah serves as the master of ceremonies over the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, this productive man as the bull of Towrah, Ashar will be right there to support her Baal. It's going to make him smile from ear to ear, seeing the full closure of God's story. So not only am I pleased to see Leah receiving the recognition her contributions deserve, I'm delighted to be prophetically seen standing beside her as her husband, as is bequeathed in the ceremonial title, Ashar, the blessed and beneficial. I have and will continue to halal her, to reflect her bright and clear light, while consistently praising her by extolling her virtues. I have halal appreciated her tremendous value and her exceptional worth. And it is obvious that, well, I'm not alone, but instead part of a glorious chorus that has now risen up among her covenant children. Now, the following pronouncement was inspired by Yahowah. It was scribed by our king, who clearly supported his father's assessment. It is unique in all of the Torah and prophets. Here at the conclusion of the ultimate intervention, we find the king who had previously shown more interest in women's bodies than their minds, and their sexual proclivity rather than their mental acuity, announcing that many women may have been highly competent and that they also engaged admirably. And then, after his tribute to the contribution of many women, Dowd addresses the one with the character to admonish him. So in these words, the Ashar introduced by Leah and the Amah foretold by Ruth, the mother brought by Yah to save our Savior on this occasion, is afforded a status beyond compare. We are therefore in the presence of the greatest woman who ever lived. Well, according to Yahowah. It reads, many women have acted and engaged, having performed ably and aptly, demonstrating the power of their convictions and their noble character, in highly capable, competent, and worthy manners, demonstrating tremendous virtue and strength of courage, intervening powerfully and valuably. But you yourself surpass and rise above them all. Mashal word picture 3129. The final Mashal has painted the portrait of the woman who has contributed more than any other throughout time. She delivered the Gaal, the kinsman redeemer. Through the Bereth covenant family, she became the Amah, the most productive of mothers. No one has offered more, ashar, blessings, or benefits. According to God, and he knows her best of all, has been with her for many thousands of years, and affirmed this now through his son, who she returned to his father. Leah's character is sublime, and her convictions are noble. She is deemed capable and competent. She engaged when others were hesitant. She performed ably and aptly. Leah demonstrated that God was right about us all along. Given the opportunity, given the time, given the right woman who was right about him, we are capable of listening. We can learn and then respond. On behalf of her and many other women, she proved herself worthy before man and before God. This is among the most amazing statements to be found anywhere in an inspired prophetic text, and it reads, many women have acted, engaged, and performed ably and aptly, demonstrating the power of their convictions and noble character, being capable and competent. But you yourself surpass and rise, ascending and exalted above them all. And to think, there was actually a group of jealous and embittered women who believe that they speak for a spirit mom. A mother god, they say, is found in the 8th Mashal proverb, when it has no reference to a Ruach or an M. Then, not letting facts frustrate their fantasy, they ruthlessly and relentlessly slandered the M, a mother, hailed as the greatest of them all, along with Yada, the Baal husband of this amazing Ashar, blessed and beneficial woman. Adding to their misfortune, they would also protest that Dowd could not have fulfilled Passover, negating the entire purpose of the final word picture. That is why Yahowah took keen aim at them, denouncing and destroying them in the 57th chapter of Isaiah, before dispatching them to Sheol. But even more, they get a dishonorable mention by Dowd here at the conclusion of the last Mashal. Turns out the king hates them as much as does his father. This reads, this disingenuous and vain display of compassion and favoritism for popular appeal is meaningless and it's futile. It's an idolatrous pursuit and it's wasted breath. A woman who is brilliant and beautiful reveres and respects Yahowah. It is she who is to be independently admired and celebrated without compulsion for radiating her brilliant and clear light. It is she who is to be extolled on your own initiative, for being worthy of exaltation, for beaming brightly. Mashal word picture, Proverb 31:30. Leah is the one in 8 billion who would thwart the insidious pleas for popularity of a futile 8 who engendered Yahweh's wrath. Her brilliance and beauty win the day because she reveres and respects Yahowah. There is no better informed, no wiser, or more beneficial approach than this. So my beloved wife, my present from God, Yahweh's gift to every man and woman in the covenant family, should be admired, indeed celebrated, for all that she has accomplished. And keep in mind, this request is being offered by Dowd, the most acclaimed of men. A man that never respected a woman for being anything more than a physical body is now saying this of a woman. He said so because Leah enlightened him. He said so because he discovered that a woman's beauty was more than skin deep. He said so because she earned his respect. He said so because she had more respect for Yahowah than he had shown. He said so because she had not intervened. Had she not intervened, his life and ours were essentially over. The Amah, productive mother of Yahowah, would be an Ashar, beneficial blessing for all. And it is her garment of luminosity that's going to adorn every child born into the Bereth covenant, beginning with God's firstborn, Dowd. It is the fruit of the loom. As the fruit of her hands, You all have decided to entrust her as a gift. And so you should choose to be productive for her. Of your own accord, you are all appointed as a gift, present for her when approaching her and producing for her. And so her contributions and accomplishments will exclaim that she is praiseworthy. She is worthy by acknowledging her brilliant radiance and clear light from within the inner sanctum of the thoughtful assembly, inside the doors, the gates, and the portal of the community of rational thinkers. Mashal word picture, Proverb 31:31. In the 9th chapter of Isaiah, we learn that a son was given. In the 31st Mashal, we know who gift wrapped him and who delivered him to us. It's quite an accomplishment because it means that a woman saved the world. Now, I will stop here. We're at an hour and 21 minutes into this program. I have a recap of this entire Mashal from beginning to end. And I have a recap that is different than any other I've ever done. Rather than just starting with the first statement of the 31st Mashal, the final word picture, I actually share the prophecies that foretell of it. What Yahowah said in the garden about Adam and Chawah beginning again. What Leah had to offer to this conversation. What Ruth had to say. What Dowd acknowledges of the Amah that Yahowah offered him to release him from this horrible plight that he had placed himself. I am going to walk you through those that we intermixed into this long presentation, and then through the last word picture in its entirety. And I'll do so at the beginning of our next program. And as we do so, I'm going to move on to the follow-up prophecy to this, which is Yeshayah, Isaiah 54, where God will have more to say about this woman and her contributions to the covenant family. Now, from there, which will be many programs from now, I'm going to take you to where I am now in translating what Dowd did to require this intervention. So we have a lot to learn. It's a glorious place that God has brought us, completing his word picture and time for us to understand it and share it. So I thank all of you for listening, for being part of this story, and for sharing it with others. Good day.